The heart monitor's scream was the only sound in ICU room 402. Blood wasn't just leaking, it was spraying. It coated the linoleum tiles in a rhythmic, sickening pulse. Senator Julian Vane, the man holding the tie-breaking vote for the National Defense Bill, was dying. His chest was splayed open, a jagged ruin of flesh and Gore-Tex sutures. Dr. Eris Thorne, the hospital's golden boy surgeon, stood frozen. His gloved hands were shaking. The unshakable genius had nicked the pulmonary artery. "Suction, now!" Thorne yelled, but his voice cracked. He wasn't commanding, he was panicking. The crash cart hit the doorframe with a metallic bang. Nurses scrambled, tripping over wires. The room was a chaotic blur of blue scrubs and white coats. Amidst the frenzy, Serena Blake stood at the foot of the bed. She didn't move. She didn't shout. Her eyes weren't on the blood. They were fixed on the senator's neck, specifically a tiny pinpoint bruise just below the jawline. That wasn't there 10 minutes ago. "Step back, Serena," head nurse Miller shoved her aside. "Get more O-negative from the lab. Move your useless tail." Serena didn't blink. She felt the familiar coldness settle in her gut. It was the same chill she felt in the Hindu Kush when a perimeter was breached. This wasn't a surgical error. It was an execution. The monitors began a steady, flat tone. Code blue. The sound of a soul leaving the building. Thorne was sweating through his mask, his eyes darting to the security camera in the corner. He wasn't trying to save the patient anymore. He was looking for an exit strategy. Serena saw the way his hand hovered over the internal jugular. He wasn't applying pressure. He was subtly blocking the flow. "I said move," Miller screamed, her face inches from Serena's. Serena finally looked at her. It wasn't the look of a submissive night nurse. It was the look of a predator identifying a distraction. Serena reached into her pocket and gripped a silver pen. Not a cheap plastic one, but a weighted, tactical steel instrument. "The senator isn't dying from the bleed," Serena said, her voice a low, terrifying hum that cut through the room's hysteria. The doctors ignored her. The residents laughed nervously. They didn't see what she saw. They didn't see the thin, translucid wire protruding from the IV line, a microscopic delivery system for a neurotoxin that would mimic a cardiac arrest perfectly. Serena stepped forward, pushing past the head nurse with a strength that shouldn't have belonged to a woman of her frame. She reached for the senator's throat. "Security!" Thorne yelled, pointing a bloody finger at her. "Get this woman out of here! She's losing it!" 2 guards lunged for her, but Serena's hands were already moving. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. The shadows of her past were screaming to be let out. As the guards grabbed her arms, Serena's eyes locked onto the heart monitor. The rhythm wasn't just flat, it was being looped. The mistake was just the beginning. 6 hours earlier, Serena Blake was just the janitor with a stethoscope. That's what the morning shift called her. She worked the 12-hour graveyard rotation because the lights were dimmer and the questions were fewer. She kept her hair in a tight, severe bun and wore glasses she didn't need. They were a shield, a way to hide the sharpness in her eyes that usually only came from years of staring through a long-range optic. "Blake, the bedpans in 305 aren't going to empty themselves," Nurse Miller snapped, tossing a pair of soiled gloves towards Serena's face. Serena caught them out of the air without looking, a reflex she immediately regretted. She forced her shoulders to slump. She had to stay invisible. "Sorry, Nurse Miller, I'll get right on it," Serena whispered. She played the part of the broken, middle-aged woman perfectly. It was her best mission yet. After the Black Monday incident in Damascus, the agency had burned her file. She was a ghost, a dead woman walking the halls of Mercy General. She retreated to the break room, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from the effort of suppression. She opened her locker. Inside, hidden behind a box of tampons, was a small encrypted pager. It hadn't buzzed in 3 years. Today, it vibrated once, a single code. Fenrir. The senator had arrived shortly after. He was supposed to be here for a routine gallbladder removal. Simple, safe. But Mercy General was a Level 1 trauma center with deep ties to federal funding. Serena watched from the shadows as Dr. Thorne greeted the senator's private security detail. These men didn't stand like bodyguards. They stood like contractors. High port stance, eyes scanning for exits, hands never far from their waistlines. "Nurse Blake," Dr. Thorne called out as he strode down the hallway, flanked by his adoring residents. "The senator requires a private floor. Clear out the east wing and try not to trip over your own feet this time." The residents chuckled. One young man, a first year, named Kyle, smirked at her. "Is it true you failed your surgical rotation twice, Blake?" Kyle asked, loud enough for the passing interns to hear. "Maybe if you spent more time studying and less time staring at the walls, you'd be more than a glorified maid." Serena felt the heat rise in her neck. She could break his hyoid bone in 1.2 seconds. She could collapse his lung with the clipboard in her hand. Instead, she looked at the floor. "I just like the quiet, Dr. Kyle." "Yeah, well, stay quiet and stay out of the way," Thorne said, dismissing her with a wave. Serena watched them walk away. She noticed Thorne's gait. He was favoring his left side, and his hand was twitching, a classic sign of someone under immense pressure, or someone who had just been paid a very large sum of money to commit a very specific crime. She followed them at a distance, her quiet walk completely silent on the linoleum. She reached the ICU just as the senator was being prepped. That's when she saw it, a black SUV idling in the ambulance bay with no plates. And inside the senator's room, a doctor she didn't recognize was switching out the saline bags. The game was on, and Serena Blake was the only one who knew the rules. The moment the senator's heart stopped, the hospital went into a literal lockdown. Code Black echoed through the PA system, but it wasn't for a bomb threat. It was a total digital blackout. The electronic locks hissed shut. The monitors in the ICU flickered and died, replaced by a haunting blue glow. "What is happening?" Miller shrieked. The emergency lights kicked in, casting long, skeletal shadows across the bloody room. "The system is down," a tech yelled from the hallway. "We can't call out. Cell signals are jammed." Serena didn't wait for permission. She knew what a jammer meant. It meant a cleanup crew was on the way. She stepped toward the senator's bedside again. Dr. Thorne was backing away, his hands held up as if to prove his innocence to the empty air. "He's gone," Thorne whispered, his face pale. "There's nothing we can do. It was a freak embolism." "It wasn't an embolism," Serena said. She grabbed a scalpel from the tray. "Blake, put that down," Miller ordered, reaching for her. Serena pivoted, a fluid, military-grade movement that sent Miller stumbling into the equipment rack. Serena didn't even look at her. She made a precise 3-centimeter incision in the senator's neck, right where the pinpoint bruise was. With a pair of forceps, she reached into the wound. The room went silent. Even Thorne stopped breathing. Serena pulled out a microfilament wire, no thicker than a human hair. It was tipped with a dull green residue. "Neurotoxin," Serena said, her voice like ice. "Triggered by the first incision of the surgery. You didn't kill him, Thorne. You were just the distraction. They used your arrogance to mask the assassination." Before Thorne could respond, the sound of heavy boots thundered in the hallway. These weren't hospital security. The rhythm was too synchronized. 2-man stacks, moving with tactical intent. "They're here to finish the job," Serena muttered. She looked at the terrified residents and the shaking surgeon. These people had mocked her, humiliated her, and treated her like dirt for years. Now they were looking at her as if she were a ghost who had just started speaking in tongues. "Who are you?" Dr. Kyle stammered, his bravado gone. Serena ignored him. She grabbed a canister of medical-grade oxygen and a roll of surgical tape. She looked at the door. The handle was turning. The contractors didn't knock. They used a breaching charge. The door blew inward in a spray of wood and metal. A flashbang detonated, blinding everyone in the room, except Serena, who had closed her eyes and covered her ears the second she saw the charge. Through the white smoke, 3 men in tactical gear and gas masks entered. They didn't look for the senator first. They looked for witnesses. The lead man raised a suppressed submachine gun, aiming it directly at Nurse Miller's head. Serena didn't think. She moved. Serena's body remembered what her mind tried to forget. She didn't use a gun. She used the environment. As the lead gunman leveled his weapon, Serena slid across the blood-slicked floor, grabbing the heavy metal crash cart. She slammed it into the gunman's knees with the force of a battering ram. A sickening crack echoed through the room. The man went down, his weapon firing a wild burst into the ceiling. Serena didn't stop. She leaped onto the cart, using the momentum to drive a surgical pen into the gap between the second shooter's helmet and his ballistic vest. He gurgled, reaching for his throat as he collapsed. The third man swung his rifle toward her, but Serena was already gone. She had disappeared into the thick clouds of the fire suppressant system that had been triggered by the explosion. "Find her," a voice hissed from the hallway. It was a voice Serena recognized. Cold, calculated. The voice of Colonel Silas Vance, her former handler, the man who had sold her unit out in Damascus. "Is she dead?" Thorne whimpered from under a desk. "Shut up," Serena whispered, appearing behind him like a specter. Serena was covered in the senator's blood and the shooter's soot, but her eyes were terrifyingly clear. "If you want to live, you do exactly what I say. Kyle, get the senator's portable ventilator. We're moving him." "Moving him?" Kyle gasped. "He's flatlining." "He's in a chemically induced suspended animation," Serena snapped, her hands flying as she prepped a syringe of atropine and epinephrine. "If we don't get him to the pharmacy basement in 5 minutes, the toxin will crystallize in his heart. Then he really will be dead." "We can't leave," Miller cried, pointing at the door. "There are more of them out there." "I know," Serena said. She looked at the 2 fallen shooters. She stripped a radio from one of their vests and clicked the channel. Silence. They were on a closed loop. She grabbed a flashlight and checked the hallway. It was a kill zone. The private security was systematically clearing the floor. They weren't just after the senator. They were scrubbing the entire ICU. Anyone who saw their faces had to die. "Thorne, take the back of the bed. Kyle, the front. Miller, you hold the IV bags," Serena commanded. The power dynamic had shifted so violently the air felt thin. The arrogant surgeon didn't argue. The bullying nurse didn't sneer. They obeyed. "Where are we going?" Thorne asked, his voice trembling. "To the one place they won't expect a tactical retreat." Serena checked the hallway one last time. The morgue. As they wheeled the heavy bed out, Serena picked up the suppressed MP5 from the floor. She checked the chamber with a practiced, metallic click that made Thorne's blood run cold. "You're not a nurse," he whispered. Serena didn't look back. "Tonight, I'm the only thing keeping you from a body bag." The service elevator creaked as it descended toward the basement. The air grew colder, smelling of formaldehyde and industrial cleaner. Inside the cramped space, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Dr. Kyle couldn't stop staring at Serena's arms. Her scrub sleeves were pushed up, revealing a map of white, jagged scars. Shrapnel marks. A long, thin line from a combat knife, and on her inner forearm, a faded tattoo of a raven perched on a broken spear. "That's the 75th Ranger Regiment insignia," Kyle whispered, his medical training momentarily overridden by realization. "But women weren't in the—" "Wait! You were JSOC, the Raven unit." Serena kept her eyes on the floor indicator. "The Raven unit doesn't exist, Doctor, and neither do I." The elevator doors slid open to the dim, flickering lights of the morgue hallway. It was silent, save for the hum of the refrigeration units. Serena stepped out first, weapon raised, her movements a deadly dance of angles and checks. In there, she gestured to a large stainless steel door. They pushed the senator's bed into the cold room. Serena immediately went to work. She didn't need the monitors. She felt for the pulse in the senator's femoral artery. Faint. Thorne, I need you to perform a lateral thoracotomy, now, Serena ordered. In a morgue? Without anesthesia? Thorne looked horrified. I'll kill him. The toxin is pooling in the pleural cavity, Serena said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. If you don't drain it, his lungs will collapse in 60 seconds. You're a world-class surgeon, Thorne. Stop being a coward and do your job. I'll handle the security. As Thorne reluctantly grabbed a scalpel, Miller pulled Serena aside. The older woman's eyes were wide with a mix of terror and awe. Serena, I didn't know. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. Serena looked at her. For a second, the mask of the soldier slipped, and the tired woman underneath showed through. It kept me safe, Miller. Don't apologize for helping me hide. Suddenly, the radio on Serena's vest crackled. Ghost lead to Team 1. We have a trail. They're in the basement. Seal the exits. No survivors. The colonel wants the girl alive for questioning, but the rest are expendable. Serena's grip tightened on the submachine gun. She looked at the group, the surgeon she'd hated, the nurse who'd bullied her, and the resident who'd mocked her. They were her responsibility now. They're coming, Serena said. She looked at the heavy morgue drawers. I need everyone to get into a cooling unit, now. You've got to be kidding, Kyle hissed. Do it or die standing up, Serena snapped. As they climbed into the metal drawers, Serena turned off the lights. She moved to the center of the room and knelt, closing her eyes. She wasn't praying. She was listening. She was counting the footsteps. 4 men approaching from the north corridor, 1 from the vent. She reached into her medical bag and pulled out 2 bottles of highly flammable isopropyl alcohol and a box of matches. She didn't need a high-tech lab to make a bomb. She just needed a reason. The morgue door kicked open. The beam of a tactical light cut through the darkness, sweeping over the cold steel tables and the rows of refrigeration units. Serena was nowhere to be seen. Clear, a muffled voice said. 3 contractors entered, their boots clicking on the tiles. They moved toward the senator's bed, which sat empty in the center of the room. Serena had hidden him in the oversized John Doe locker. Where is he? One of the men growled. He leaned over the bed, noticing the fresh blood on the sheets. The body's still warm. They're here. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the ventilation shafts. Drop the weapons, and I might let you live long enough to stand trial. The contractors spun around, firing blindly into the ceiling grates. Dust and insulation rained down, but there was no body. It was a trick, a pre-recorded voice memo on a discarded phone. From the shadows behind the refrigeration units, Serena emerged. She didn't fire the MP5. She threw a lit bottle of alcohol at the feet of the lead shooter. Whoosh! A wall of blue flame erupted, cutting the team in half. In the chaos, Serena moved like a blur. She disarmed the second man with a brutal wristlock, using his own weight to slam his head into the corner of a middle table. She didn't kill him. She neutralized him. The third man, the leader, backed away from the flames, his mask reflecting the fire. He pulled a heavy combat knife. Blake, I should have known you'd be the one to ruin this. Serena stepped into the light. The fire highlighted the scars on her face. Vance sent his best lapdog. How's the pay, Miller? The man froze. He reached up and pulled off his mask. It wasn't a stranger. It was the hospital's head of security, Marcus, a man Serena had shared coffee with every morning for 2 years. Better than a nurse's salary, Marcus sneered. You are a legend, Serena, but legends belong in the ground. The senator has to die. The bill can't pass. Too many people are getting rich off the status quo. Not on my watch, Serena said. You're outnumbered, Blake. My team is already framing you. The police are on their way, and the footage has been edited. You're the disgruntled nurse who went on a killing spree. You're the villain here. Marcus lunged. He was fast, trained, and twice her size, but Serena had survived the mountains of Tora Bora. She dodged the blade, the steel whistling past her ear. She didn't strike back with her hands. She grabbed a nearby defibrillator paddle. "Clear!" she shouted. She slammed the paddle into Marcus's wet, sweat-soaked chest and pulled the trigger. Thump! Marcus's body arched violently, his heart seized by the massive electrical discharge. He hit the floor, twitching. Serena stood over him, breathing hard, but she didn't feel victorious. She heard the sirens outside. Marcus wasn't lying. The official narrative was already being written. Suddenly, the door to the morgue opened. It wasn't the police. It was Dr. Thorne, holding a bloody scalpel and a cell phone. "I got it," Thorne said with his voice shaking. "I recorded everything, the whole confession." Serena looked at him. The arrogant surgeon was finally standing tall. But then the phone in his hand exploded in a hail of gunfire. Thorne screamed, clutching his shattered hand as he dove behind a stainless steel counter. A sniper from across the courtyard had found a line of sight through the small, high window of the morgue. "Down! Stay down!" Serena yelled. She grabbed Thorne by the collar and dragged him toward the back exit. Miller and Kyle emerged from their lockers, faces ashen. They were trapped in the basement with a team of professional assassins and a sniper watching the only exit. "They're jamming the elevators again," Kyle said, checking the panel. "We're boxed in." "The laundry chute," Serena said, pointing to a small square door in the wall. "It leads to the sub-basement, then to the oxygen farm. It's the only way out that isn't covered by cameras." "I'm not going down a trash slide," Miller cried. "Then stay here and die," Serena said flatly. She didn't wait. She shoved the senator's limp body, now stabilized by Thorne's surgery, into the chute first, followed by the terrified doctors. As Serena prepared to jump, a grenade rolled into the room. She kicked the chute door shut and threw herself into the corner. Boom! The blast blew the refrigeration doors off their hinges. The room filled with freezing mist and the smell of ozone. Serena tumbled down the chute, hitting the pile of dirty linens 2 floors below. Her shoulders screamed in pain, dislocated. She didn't make a sound. She stood up, grabbed her arm, and slammed it against the concrete wall. With a sickening pop, the joint slid back into place. "Is everyone okay?" she hissed into the dark. "I think I broke my toe," Kyle whimpered. "Live through it," Serena snapped. They were in the oxygen farm, a massive room filled with towering white tanks of pressurized O2. It was a labyrinth of pipes and hissing valves. It was also a ticking bomb. One spark, and the entire hospital block would level. "Blake!" A voice boomed over the intercom system. It was Vance. He was in the security booth. "I see you on the heat sensors. You can't hide. Give us the senator, and I'll let the doctors go. You know I'm a man of my word." Serena yelled back, her voice echoing off the tanks. "Your word is worth about as much as the lives you sold in Damascus, Silas." She turned to Thorne. "Give me your lighter." "I don't smoke," Thorne said. "I know you keep one for your expensive cigars," Serena countered. Thorne sheepishly handed over a gold Zippo. Serena began turning valves. The air began to hiss louder. The concentration of oxygen in the room was rising to volatile levels. "What are you doing?" Miller whispered. "You'll kill us all." "No," Serena said, her eyes gleaming with a dark, tactical light. "I'm setting a trap. Kyle, take the senator and get to the maintenance tunnel behind Tank 4. Miller and Kyle, go with him. Don't stop until you see daylight." "What about you?" Thorne asked. Serena looked at the door. The handles were frosting over. The Black Ops team was using liquid nitrogen to bypass the locks. "I'm going to remind the colonel why they called me the Raven," she said. The door to the oxygen farm shattered like glass. 5 men entered wearing full-face respirators. They knew the risk of the oxygen-rich environment. They weren't using firearms. They were carrying high-voltage stun batons and tactical crossbows. Serena watched from atop a high catwalk. She was a shadow among shadows. "Spread out," the team leader ordered. "She's alone. Don't let her touch the valves." Serena dropped from the catwalk like a hawk. She landed on the shoulders of the last man, her legs wrapping around his neck in a brutal scissor lock. She didn't use a knife. She used a heavy-duty wrench she'd grabbed from the maintenance kit. Clang. The man's helmet dented, and he went limp. She didn't stay to celebrate. She rolled behind a tank as a bolt from a crossbow hissed through the air where her head had been a second ago. "She's behind the main manifold." The contractors moved in a pincer movement. They were professionals, but they were fighting in a room Serena had studied for 3 years during her boring night shifts. She knew every leak, every loose pipe, and every blind spot. She reached up and yanked a bypass lever. A massive cloud of pressurized oxygen hissed out, creating a localized whiteout. "I can't see!" one of the men yelled. Serena appeared in the mist. She used a surgical tubing as a garrote, neutralizing another man in seconds. She was moving with a speed that defied her age and her nurse persona. This was the Raven in her element. But then a heavy boot caught her in the ribs. Serena flew backward, hitting a tank with a dull thud. Silas Vance stepped out of the mist. He wasn't wearing a mask. He looked older, more scarred, but his eyes were still the same pits of ice. "You always were too sentimental, Serena," Vance said, pointing a specialized, non-sparking tranquilizer pistol at her. "You could have been a queen in the New World Order. Instead, you're playing nursemaid to a corrupt politician and a few mediocre doctors." Serena coughed, tasting blood. "At least I don't have to look in the mirror and see a traitor." Vance sneered. "The senator is already dead. Even if he survives the night, his reputation is ruined. We've released the files. He's a traitor in the eyes of the public." "Check your facts, Silas," Serena said, a bloody smirk on her face. "The files you released? I swapped the drive in the senator's briefcase 3 hours ago. You didn't leak his secrets. You leaked yours." Vance's face went purple with rage. He pulled the trigger. The dart hissed through the air, but Serena wasn't there. She had dropped into a maintenance crawl space. As she moved, she flicked the gold Zippo. She didn't throw it at him. She threw it at the high-pressure vent she'd cracked open. "Wait!" Vance screamed. The explosion wasn't a fireball. It was a localized, high-pressure kinetic blast. The sheer force of the expanding gas threw Vance across the room, slamming him into the reinforced concrete wall. The room didn't level, but the shockwave knocked everyone unconscious. Serena crawled out of the hole, her ears ringing, her vision swimming. She looked at Vance's broken body. He was alive, but he wasn't going anywhere. She picked up the Zippo. "Never underestimate the quiet nurse, Silas. We see everything." The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon when the first FBI tactical teams breached the hospital. They expected a massacre. What they found was a surgical miracle. In the center of the lobby, Senator Vane sat in a wheelchair, pale but conscious, surrounded by Dr. Thorne, Nurse Miller, and Dr. Kyle. They looked like they had been through a war zone. "Where is she?" the lead agent demanded, his weapon lowered. "Where is the woman who called the tip-in?" Thorne looked at the agent, then at the elevator bank. She's upstairs, finishing her shift." In the security office, the FBI found a stack of digital drives. They contained everything: the assassination plot, the offshore accounts of the contractors, and the raw footage of Dr. Thorne's confession and his subsequent bravery. The media circus began within the hour. Dr. Thorne was hailed as a hero who saved the senator under fire. Nurse Miller was praised for her calm leadership. Even Kyle got a segment on the morning news. But Serena Blake wasn't in any of the shots. She was in the locker room, peeling off her blood-stained scrubs. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror. Her shoulder was bruised black and blue. Her ribs were taped. She looked old. She looked tired. "Nurse Blake?" Serena turned. It was the senator. He had pushed his own wheelchair into the room, his security detail standing outside the door. "Senator," Serena said, her voice neutral, "you should be in recovery." "I know who you are," Vane said, his gravelly whisper. "I remember the Raven. You pulled my unit out of Fallujah in '04. I thought you were dead." Serena didn't say anything. She pulled a fresh, clean scrub top over her head. "The world thinks Thorne saved me, but I saw you. I saw what you did in that room." "The world needs a hero, Senator. A surgeon is a much better story than a ghost," Serena said. She picked up her bag. "Keep your mouth shut about me. That's the only payment I want." "The agency will come looking for you," Vane warned. "Vance wasn't working alone. There are people in the Pentagon who wanted me gone." "Let them come," Serena said, walking toward the door. "I've had 3 years of practice at being invisible. I'm getting quite good at it." As she walked out of the hospital, she passed Nurse Miller. The head nurse stopped her. Miller didn't shout. She didn't throw gloves. She simply handed Serena a fresh cup of coffee. "See you tomorrow night, Serena?" Miller asked softly. Serena took the coffee and allowed herself a tiny, wit-filled smile. "Only if the bedpans are empty, Miller." The hospital returned to its frantic, sterile rhythm. To the world, the Mercy General Siege was a headline that faded after a week. Dr. Thorne moved to a prestigious clinic in D.C. Nurse Miller retired with a full pension. Dr. Kyle became a trauma specialist, always carrying a tactical pen in his pocket. But in the dark corners of the hospital, the legend of the silent nurse grew. The night shift spoke in whispers about the woman who could stitch a wound in total darkness and who once took down 5 gunmen with nothing but a crash cart and a prayer. In a small, nondescript apartment across town, Serena Blake sat by the window. Her nurse glasses were on the table. She was cleaning a 9mm Glock with the same precision she used to clean a surgical tray. Her encrypted pager buzzed. "New patient, St. Jude's, room 302, the witness." Serena sighed. She looked at her reflection. She wasn't a nurse. She wasn't a soldier. She was the thin line between order and chaos, the one nobody ever bothered to notice until it was too late. She stood up, tucked the weapon into a concealed holster, and pulled on her blue jacket. She had a shift starting in 20 minutes. As she walked out of the door, she glanced at a framed photo on her wall, a group of soldiers in the desert, all laughing. She was in the center, looking fierce and young. She touched the glass for a moment, then turned off the light. She arrived at St. Jude's and punched her time card. "Blake, you're late," the new head nurse barked. "The floors in the ER are a mess. Get a mop and move it." Serena bowed her head, the submissive, quiet nurse returning instantly. "Yes, ma'am, right away." She walked toward the ER, her footsteps making no sound. She passed the security cameras, knowing exactly where the blind spots were. She saw a man in a suit sitting in the waiting room, his hand hovering near his jacket. He didn't notice the quiet nurse with the mop. He didn't see the way she adjusted her glasses to get a better look at his neck for a hidden tattoo. He didn't know he was already dead if he made a move. Serena Blake started to mop, her eyes never leaving the target. She was the ghost in the halls, the shadow in the ward, the one detail everyone missed. Never underestimate the quiet nurse.